Welcome to the Eltropy Exchange podcast, where leaders of community financial institutions connect, learn, and stay ahead. In each episode, we sit down with industry executives, innovators, and experts for candid conversations about the challenges and opportunities shaping CFIs today. At Eltropy, we believe conversations matter. Let's dive in.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back to the Eltropy Exchange. My name is Michael Pupil, the Vice President of the Collections Business Unit here at Eltropy. And this morning, afternoon, this evening, whenever you're listening to this, I have the pleasure of introducing Michelle Perry. Michelle, welcome to the show. Thank you for carving out time.
Thank you. A pleasure to be here.
Amazing. We're going to have a lot of fun, guys. If you don't know Michelle is the Assistant Vice President of the Consumer Lending at ABNB. She has over 35 years of credit union experience, beginning as a member service associate and advancing all the way up to AVP. Throughout her career, Michelle has worked in various areas, including mortgage lending and servicing, though her primary focus has been on consumer lending and collections. As AVP, she oversees mortgage servicing, consumer lending, card services, and collections, and in her leisure time, Michelle engages in needlepointing, reading, and spending time with her friends and family at Lake Gaston, which you just gave away a little secret. I had to Google Lake Gaston on the border between, North Carolina and Virginia, and it looks like a little hidden gem. So Michelle, welcome again to the show. Happy post-4th holiday. It is great to have you on.
Thank you. Thank you. Pleasure to be here. And yes, Lake Gaston is a hidden gem.
I'm
Very
telling
much
you right
so.
now, guys, go Google it. You may see Michelle on the lake with her family, but it looks like a really serene, beautiful location.
It is. It is. We were there for the 4th with the family and just enjoying ourselves. So very nice place.
Right on. Well, for everybody listening, happy 4th to the family and friends. And if you're listening to this way later and it makes absolutely no sense, well, that's a you problem than not us problem. Right, Michelle? So
That's right.
let's start it off today. We have had some fun conversations. The first time that we got to meet face to face was at the Temenos conference, the Temenos user conference just a few weeks back. It feels like months and years at this point. Oh my God, I can't even keep track of this. But I think the most fun question that I always ask people on this, and where I'd love to start with you today, is you've had a long and storied career in credit unions, roughly 35 years, as your bio, kind of explains to us. Let's go back in time to where it all started and how you got started in the credit union space.
I started as a teller, got out of school, started as a teller. My cousin was doing it. She said, hey, why don't you leave where you are? I was at a bank. I'd been there for a couple months and I didn't like it. Came over to the credit union and never looked back. I started there, went to receptionist, went into lending, knew lending was my thing, and just knew that I did not want to do the member service side. You put me in member services, doing the same thing day in, day out, just wasn't my thing. So lending was different. It was always a new story, always a tale. So I just knew that that's where I wanted to go. And since then, I've been in the lending side and enjoyed it ever since.
Well, I love it. And now this part of the career hasn't been always with ABNB. So first with a bank, didn't love it, went into credit unions. How long have you been with ABNB now?
I've been with ABNB now almost 7 years.
Yeah.
I was with my first credit union, which was Argent Credit Union in Chesterfield, Virginia. I was with them for 22 years, left there, came down to the Virginia Beach area, worked at a bank again in the mortgage side for a couple of years just to kind of get in the area, then went on and got on with Langley, was with Langley for 5 years. And my boss at Langley came over to ABNB and said, hey, why don't you come run my lending over here? And I said, all right, I can do that. Langley was pretty much established and had their thing, and ABNB needed some help getting things off the ground and reconstructing. And so off I went, and over here I stayed.
Well, what a beautiful compliment to have, a former boss, go over to a new place and then want you to come and kind of get the band back together. That is a true testament to the work that you're able to do. 35 years is a long time in terms of technology. It's not a long time in terms of life.
Yeah.
But I think you have seen it all, especially starting from the teller role all the way, to this AVP role that you have today, everything in between. I'm going to fire over 2 questions to you. One, what is the thing that hasn't gone out of style in 35 years? And then what is the things that have now started to change, or what are you now looking at for the first time that you'd never have, before?
Yeah, people don't change as much. So that's the one thing. The members, they don't change as much in the 35 years. Yeah, there's different, generations and stuff like that. But the most part is just being sympathetic and empathetic with your members and talking to them and having a relationship. And once you do that, then you're good. But that's never going to change. I don't think you can ever get away with having some personal touch. Some generations don't want personal touch and they don't want you to know all their stuff. And so that's a little different in the challenge of now, especially with the texting and everything else that, you can get somebody on a text where you're not going to get them on a call. They don't want to talk. And I have to admit, I'm one of those people that when I go home, I don't want to answer my phone. Text me, I'll answer, but I don't want to hear the phone after hearing it ring all day long. So that's the thing that's changed the most. But the software has gotten so much better. I mean, you used to have to keep little signature cards and you'd have to file them. And then if you needed to verify signature, you had to go pull one. Well, now it's all on the screen and you can see it. So that's been a pleasant change. I spent many an hour in the vault actually filing files, loan files. Oh yeah, cards and loan files, and whew, that was fun. Now,
yeah, I'll date myself. One of my first roles ever while I was in college was at RBC, and same thing. And I was in the student center, so all the international students that would come and create their accounts, and they'd have that little cue card that
yeah,
they would. Then at the end of the day, you'd open up, 200 different accounts. Now you have 200 cue cards that you gotta go file.
I know.
Worst part of the day. Worst part of the day.
Well, the worst would be for us would be month end because everything had to go to the board. So you'd have a stack of all of the accounts you opened in the whole month. And I worked for a credit union that was on a plant site. So everybody came to the plant and everybody added a new club and everybody did this. And I mean, I'd have stacks like this and I'd be like, but hey, on your downtime, it gave you something to do.
So to boil it down, the people haven't changed, but the technology definitely has.
Definitely has. It is so much for the better. I mean, you get now where, it's more of a point and click and you choose. You had to remember codes back then. You had to remember, and you had 15 different systems. None of them were integrated and you're flipping around 14 passwords. And yeah, it was a lot of manual back then, but now it's so much better.
Much better. But I love the words that you used, and you used my favorite word. And when it comes to at least collections or even just a relationship in general, empathy, I think that is such a powerful one to understand and know what the other person is going through is such a bridge that is built between two people. The moment that you have a shared experience or at least understand an experience, there is a lot more credibility and belief that the person that you're speaking to can provide, some sort of value. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a fix, but, at least you get it. You get it.
Yeah, you do. And you have to get it because there are people that are telling you a fib or, are not telling you the right things. But for the most part, you're going to be that person one day. You're going to walk in their shoes. You're going to do this. Life is tough. And it's like I tell my collectors all the time, I said, it's stressful out there. Don't you stress while you're here. Just talk to the people and just try to do the best you can with them. But let me do the stressing. That's my job. My job is to be the stressor, not theirs. So just try to figure out how to work with them and just try to make people have a good day. It's tough. It's tough.
And yeah, I agree with you. And I'm going to pivot to, I know I asked you a question, what hasn't gone out of style, what has stayed the same? And you immediately took the member's position to this, but I'm going to switch gears to your team. In your role now, you lead a number of different departments and a much bigger group. You also indicated that in your journey, when you started at ABNB, there were things that needed to be built or rejigged or kind of changed. And we all know how people love change. Talk to us a little bit about your leadership style, right? Like, how do you build trust with the team? And I'll let you share as much as you want to share, but I gotta tell you, for those listening, Michelle has got a wonderful team. They love to be pranksters as well. I think they have a work hard, play hard mentality. But talk to us a little bit about your leadership style and the environment that you've created. I think it is unique, fun, and no doubt really well performing.
It's very fun. They do perform very well, and they're very loyal to me, and I have to be honest, I'm so thankful for all of them. But I think that with me that it was easier for me to get in touch with them by actually doing what they did. I mean, I came in and I could do a lot of the things that they do. I did them. I've been there, I've done that, but getting my hands wet and getting in there and getting dirty with them and sitting there and working through their problems or talking through issues and asking their buy-in. You know, if I sat with them and I actually did what they did, they were like, you know, she knows what she's doing, you know. And you get in with them and you sit out there with them, and you don't act like you're in the ivory tower. You come out of the ivory tower, you walk down into the mud with the mudslingers, and you sling it with them. And then they give you respect. You know, you earn it with them. I didn't come in here and try to gain their respect as far as I'm your boss, I want respect. I came in here and said, I'm your boss, what can I do? And, you know, it's this morning I was going through some things, and one young lady had missed an invoice, and I just posted all of the invoice, and I took it out there and I said, hey, you missed this. I went ahead and posted it. And she's like, what? I was like, no, we all make mistakes. We all, you know, we all miss something. That's why we're all here and interconnected. It's because if you do that and you get in with them and you sit out there with them, then you become one of them. And the pranksters I have out here, I'm going to tell you, they're really good. There was one gentleman that came in one morning, opened his door, and there's 200 and some balloons in his office, and he's just stands there, just turns around and walks off. I mean, he didn't know what to do. You know, he's like, you know, how do I get in here? He crawls over his desk to get to work, and the balloons ended up out all over everywhere. They end up about half of them in my office because he's trying to get in and out of his office. They silly stringed my office. They saran wrapped everything in my office, took all of my scissors, letter opener, anything with a blade or something that could cut the saran wrap. They took all, yeah, they took that away. They're a fun team. They get along great. There's, you know, days when they aggravate each other. They're like brother and sister out there, but it is so much fun. And that's what you do.
It's what you do. And what I love about that is the idea here is to make sure that you're monitoring so it doesn't go too far, right? Because it is susceptible. Everybody gets carried away. So you got to make sure that it's staying within line. But the most amazing part about an environment like that, where people are comfortable to kind of poke fun a little bit, right? Lightly. We don't always have to go to the extreme or become offensive, but the best part about that, at least on the teams that I have had that type of camaraderie, the amount of trust within the group is unparalleled to other groups that I have worked with. And where that ultimately has served me whenever I have led those type of groups is that the honesty that comes back, the good, the bad, the ugly of what is working within the team, what is not working within the team. And by the way, that also transcends into the personal life of individuals, right? Everybody has a life outside of the office. And sometimes that life outside of the office can seep into, you know, inside the walls. And unless you know what the issue is, you're powerless to try to help it. And you may not be able to fix the problem, but if you can empathize with what the person is going through, then you can start making a couple of changes or, you know, being a little bit more flexible. And I think that's really the superpower of what you've created with that camaraderie of the team, that it's both internal as well as external. Correct me if I'm wrong there, Michelle.
No, it's true. And with this team, they had a leader for so many years, and they were so tight with that leader. So when she left and I came in and took over them and managing them, they were kind of like, you know, I don't know. And to gain that trust again, when they pranked me and they did my office, I was like, I've arrived. Yeah, I'm in. And it was so exciting to actually feel like, you know, I was part of that team for once. It didn't matter how much I tried. And that's the thing. If you try, they know you're trying. So you just kind of have to sometimes just absorb it. But with them, and when they pranked me, it was like, oh yes, I'm in. And I knew that I'd made it. And they've been together for a while. And, you know, they're very special. For to have the outlook that they have as collectors in this environment is just amazing. And the rest of them are, they're all getting to know each other, or they're, there's one group that's only been together for like 6 months now, and they're, learning each other, but they've gotten really tight, and they're good, and they get each other, and they're all the same age. So it's really worked out good with that team. The rest of the teams have already kind of been established, and then and I had those teams for years, but then now to have this team actually accept me, and I was just like, this is amazing.
Now, do you think that acceptance came from, like you said, get your hands dirty, jump into the trenches? Because you yourself have even said that you've gotten out of the office that you have, and you've got a walled off office, obviously for some of the conversations that you need to have as AVP, but you've actually transplanted yourself and put yourself right in the middle of the floor.
Yep.
And then I'll pick up a phone, make a dial, talk to a member, resolve an issue, and just, like what they're doing as well. And do you attribute to being part of the team maybe quicker versus, a different path? Was that done by design, or is that just who you are and it's going to be what it's going to be?
Both. It was done by design, and two, it's who I am. With me, I have a hard time sometimes letting go and being the AVP and not, overthinking. I mean, I get into the weeds too much, and sometimes they have to pull me out of the weeds. But, with this team and getting involved and sitting out there in the middle of them and actually listening to them and hearing their problems on a day-to-day and trying to solve them and trying to fix things. And like, they'll come and say, this is crazy. Why do we do this way? Why can't we do it this way? And we'll start talking about stuff. So we'll start troubleshooting stuff on the fly out there, and they're like, and we'll change things around, and I'll say, okay, how do you like this? They'll go, why do we have so many screens? And I'm like, okay, well, you want me to get rid of them? They're like, yeah. I said, which ones do you want? And then we'll change things up on the fly, and they're like, oh, I love this. This is great, So it's made it a lot better to get their buy-in with me being out there. But, there's times, like you said, I have to come in here and I have to do some things. And, like 1 or 2 days a week, I'll sit in my office and do stuff. And they know that that's when I'm hammering down to get stuff done. But other than that, I'll sit out there. I'll take if it's a meeting I can take out there and not be just too disruptive to them, I'll put the headphones on, I'll sit out there. But if they need me on a call, I'm right there. I'm able to walk over to them and say, okay, let's how do we fix this problem before the call escalates, and just try to be there with them. And it makes it so much easier when you're a part of the team and you act as you're a part of the team. And to me, they're the team. I'm just the lucky one who gets to come in here and manage them and be the umbrella, so to speak, over, between upper management and them. And I'm the one who blocks all of that. But we were talking about some things coming down the road, and I said, how do you feel about this? And they're looking at me like, what? You really want to know our opinion? And I went, this right here, we have a team, and this is your team. You have say. You need to tell me how you want to do it. Now, if it's wrong or right, we'll talk about it. But for the most part, I want them to be able to feel like this is their team and they are in control, and I empower them to be in control. So it's been really nice, because when I say something, because I can come up with some kooky ideas, and I'll say something to them and I'll say, hey, what do you think about this? And they're like, at first they were like, I don't know if I should say anything. And then now they're like, oh no, that's stupid. We're not doing that. And I appreciate that. I mean, I do, because like I said, I know some of the things that I come up with are kooky, but to tell my people that you have the power to come back at me and say, I know you heard me, but you're not listening to me and you're not focusing on what I'm telling you is okay. And, the first time I had a couple people that have done that, and the first time that one of them did it, I said, you're not going to sleep tonight because you feel bad about telling me I was not listening to you. And he said, yes, I am. And I said, don't. I said, I need to be put in my spot sometimes too. I need to know, that I'm not paying attention. When they say these things and they come back to me and they say, as long as it's not disrespectful, and they're not, none of them have been disrespectful. And as long as they come back to me and say, whoa, back up. Did you literally hear what I said? And It's fun because it'll call me out too. Because usually I might be fighting 10 different problems in my head and I'm not paying attention. So sometimes it's good to hear that. And, they
Yeah.
back me up and I go, you're right. I didn't hear that completely. I'm still learning. I don't know everything and I'm not gonna.
Well, it's also depending on what the topic of conversation is. You may not necessarily also know some of the context that is paramount
True.
to what it is that we're talking about. On a previous podcast, we were talking to an individual by the name of Buddy who made the comment, change should never come with a surprise.
True.
Right. And so that context or that opinion of the team, like there are always going to be decisions that are made at an organizational level that maybe you or I don't like or even
Mm-hmm.
agree with. But
Right.
sometimes we got to go take that hill, right? Like we got to
Yep.
go do it. Those are the marching orders. We may not like it. It may be dangerous. It may suck. And no disrespect. I think that is a much more kind of a real life scenario than what it is that we're doing here. But you know what I mean? Sometimes we get our marching orders that may not necessarily be great. If we discuss it as a team and we understand the context as to why we need to execute this, as long as you get the buy-in, and I do feel like you do get buy-in from the team, especially on those decisions that are not necessarily the fan favorites, but we all know that we need to row in unison together here, right? We can't have
Yes.
sabotage because we don't like it, and we all know, or we all have worked with some of those people before that because we don't like it, they just tend to move a little slower.
Oh yeah. And I've got a few of those on this team and I've got the pot stirrers and I've got all the other ones that you can.
People are people. Yeah.
Yes, people are people, and I have all of those characters out there. I mean, I have underneath me right now, I think I have 43 people, so I've got all of that out there. Fortunate for her, but unfortunate for us. We had a lady that just left us, and she was 74, so she's my oldest, and then I go all the way down to 20-year-olds. But her wisdom and her way of looking at things and how you approach her is so much different than you approach the 20-year-old than you approach the 30-year-old. So it was always so much fun with the versatility of this team and how between all of them and the insight you get from them and their life experiences is always great. But you still, like you said, changes. They should never have to worry about change. And they know it's coming. We all know it's coming. We all know that things are going to happen and they're going to stink and we're not going to like them. But for the most part, they need to be able to feel secure that if there's something they don't like, that they're able to walk in my office and say, hey, I don't like this. Here's my reasons why. Invent it. And then we say, okay, well, here's the reasons why we have to do it. And they go, okay. And then they walk on. And then they feel good because somebody listened. And that's the whole thing is sometimes they just, whether they like a decision, don't like a decision, is they feel like they have a voice. And, we're doing some transitioning here and changing some things. And I want to change up how the department's kind of laid out. And we've talked about it as a team. And management has agreed to it. And just hearing them and talking to them and saying, how do you feel about this? And just giving them a voice to say, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Or say, no. And then we say, well, this is why we thought this way. And they're like, okay. So you give them the respect that they're due. I mean, like you said, we all come in here, we're all the same people. We all get up every morning with the same challenges. So if you come in and you take my thing with them is, this is what I tell them. When you walk through the door, leave your stress out there. You can't always do it, but leave it outside and let me stress in here. And I'll do the stressing and then you guys can, worry about the other stresses when you get home. And that's what they do. And they don't stress about it. They'll walk in my office, they'll say their piece, and they walk out and they're like, I got to vent that,
I was heard, I was listened to. Yeah.
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 And they saw my point, and it makes it so much better. There's such a great group of individuals out there that, all of them different life experiences and different things, and they come together. And if they can continue to come together, that's what I've done. I've done something right.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well said, because if they come together, just getting a group of people, and it is a random group of people, right? They applied for a job.
Oh, yeah.
they're the 43 that are under you are not the 43 that would be hanging out on weekends, together. It's ABNB and your team that has brought this group of 43 to now collectively work with the aim of what you guys are looking for. It's not an easy task to accomplish. And I agree with you. I think the more of that camaraderie that you build within the group, even those external factors that while you try as hard as you can to leave them at the door, they 100% sometimes seep into the internal stuff. And when they have your trust and the respect level is there, I think, you would be the first person, Michelle, as a leader, I know that I am, is that when somebody comes up to me and shares some of the the external stuff, the family stuff that's happening, man, do you want to, that's the most umbrella, the snowplow, whatever the analogy is that you want to just shelter your people from that pain. That's probably your first instinct as well.
I try to know my people. I try to know their names, their kid, well, of course their names, but their kids' names, their spouses' names, the people that are important to them's names, because when you connect on that level and they say, wait a minute, she took time to know not only me, but my family and what makes me happy. When you do that and you understand that, it comes off a lot better and you come off as someone who really does care. And I do care about my people. And, my husband works for a Fortune 500 company, and his boss I met at the Christmas party, and he turned around and looked at me and he said, hey, Michelle, not, hey, Miss Perry or anything like that. He said, hey, Michelle. And he wasn't even prompted for my name. And to know my name from a gentleman who's I think he's fourth or third in line of succession on that company, to know that, I said, you're not a worker. Yeah, I said, you're a little more than a worker, because he's not going to know the average Joe's, name. But to turn around and actually extend his hand and say, Michelle. And I've always been that way with my people. I want to know them. I want them to understand that I'm there. We might not always get along. We might not always agree, but I do care. I mean, we spend a lot of time together, and to care about your people is really what leadership is not only lead them the right way, but to care about them and show them the care and show them that people really do care about them in the world. Because right now people don't feel like anybody cares about anybody. And, if you can do a little bit of something for somebody, it goes a long way. It really does. It goes a lot.
There's a great soundbite. Do a little something for somebody, right? It doesn't take much. If everybody just does a little, the day becomes a heck of a lot nicer.
It does.
All said.
Yeah, and you don't have to give them $1 million, and you don't have to give them the secrets to the world. Just give them a little caring and a little empathy, and you just be there. Be you, be there, and it helps. It really does.
Well, you mentioned it yourself. You on your team, you have, individuals that are in their 20s all the way up to 72, 73 years old now, and everything in between, while the people side of things has not changed in 35 years. The technology side of things definitely has. So now, how do you manage the technology side, both with your team internally, as well as how that is communicated and resonates with the members? Because that, I think, is not more challenging, because I think interpersonal communication is always a challenge. Always, always.
Always.
Now you add the complexity of the device or the channel in which you're going to use. And there are many in front of all of us. And it is difficult to navigate these. So now the moving target, so to speak, that goes through this. Talk to me about how you navigate the changing technologies after 3.5 decades, both internally and externally.
Yeah, and it's fun because, how you communicate and how the 70-year-old processes technology compared to the 20-year-old is, yes, completely different. It's a little harder to get the older generation to buy in. So your tone and the way you sell it has to be different with them. They're going to still be the ones who get the mail out of the mailbox and who want to see physically, the text on their phone, they're like, I'm still trying to work on my mom not to click on text messages. And, she's still like, I know, you tell me not to. And I said, yes. But, you give a kid and the kid's going to look at it and go, oh, that's scams, and they just delete it right away. And so it's the technology. It's real funny because I keep telling them, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again. Well, you send a letter to a 25-year-old and they're like, oh, there's mail in the mailbox. What is that? So that's different. So you can't communicate with them. You got to send them email. You got to send them text. You got to communicate differently. They're easier to get buy-in on the technology and the changes. But then you have the older generation who's like, no. But then with my people, it's like, okay, let's look at this a little differently. Let's figure out how we can do this smarter, not harder. And then you're not doing as much. And they're like, so, I keep telling, there's a couple out there that I keep telling, you do things and I don't want to say lazy because that's not the word, but the way they do it is they don't really they're not feeling it on a certain day. And you can tell because they just really don't want to call people on a certain day. And it's like, you work harder to not work than if you worked and got it done. And they're like, you mean that? I said, yeah, I mean that. You're working harder than what you need to. And so if you get them on board that way, and they're kind of a little younger, so I can pull them into the technology discussion and I can get them in on it. And they're like, oh. And I'm like, yeah, you can do that. And they're like, okay, how do we do this? And I can teach them how to do it real quick. And they're like, all in. So, I keep telling them because they're all, everybody's always worried about if you do technology, they're going to get rid of people. There's always going to be people that have to run this stuff behind the scenes. You're not going to get rid of jobs. I keep telling them, look, what I'm trying to do is trying to make it more efficient so you have more time to sit around and think. And they're like, you want us not to work? And I said, yes, sometimes I do. Sometimes you need to stop and smell the roses. Yeah. Walk around the building, get some clarity, walk outside, walk around the building, do something, and they're like, and I'm like, yeah, I'm trying to make it so that when you get a task done, you could take a breather for 5 minutes and not have to be so rushed all day long because we live in a world where we rush too much. So if I can get the technology to do it for them and they're pointing and clicking and it's non-thinking and they just do their thing and they move on, they're like, oh, I got 5 minutes. I said, yeah, you got 5 minutes. Do something else with it. Talk to your neighbor. Talk to your buddy. Don't spend that 5 minutes cleaning up your stuff ready to go home for the day. Don't be so rushed to get out of here. We cut staff and, try to be as optimal as we can. And we optimize everything. And that's good. And I'm okay with that. But sometimes we optimize too much and we put too much stress on certain people. And you have to find that balance. And if I can get the technology to be that balance, then I'm all about it, and, sometimes they're like, they stress out about, but I didn't get this done. Cause I'll tell them, stop, go walk around, do something. And they're like, but I didn't get this done. I didn't get that done. And I said, has anybody said anything to you about that? They're like, no. And I said, then if I'm not saying anything, don't worry about it. Yeah. Take a lap. Get up, walk around. And, the best thing I did was put stand-up desk out there. They're all loving that. Now they stand up half the time during the day. And, the first one I put out there, I was like, is she really going to like it? Is she not? Because I'm kind of between on my stand-up desk. Sometimes I'm using it, sometimes I'm not. And she stands all day. I mean, literally. And there was 2 days when she was sitting and I walked out there, I said, you don't feel good, do you? She goes, no, I don't. And I said, I can tell you're not standing. So, so that little bit of technology, was a huge thing for them. But, trying to put the texting in and trying to do, things and not do snail mail and get them to where the system works for them and not having to do 10 different steps. That is where it needs to go, and people need to do and look at it more and more to what integrates. And I'm all about it. I have I have a team that it's all for integration. I have leadership that's all about integration. We do all kinds of things to try to do things better every day, and it makes it so much easier. And selling it, I don't really have too much of a hard time selling it if I explain it in a way that's geared to your audience. I'm not going to sell the 70-year-old the same thing I'm going to sell the 20-year-old. The 20-year-old, I'm going to look at it and go, hey, texting, and they're going to go, yeah. The 70-year-old, she's going to go, what? I ain't answering no text. You better send me a letter, So again, and I tell her, I say, but you know what? You can't always answer, you don't always go to your mailbox. And she said, true. And I said, but you can't always answer a phone either. And she's like, yeah. And I said, everybody works in a pod village pretty much, or they're at home now. A lot of people are at home now, but still everybody's coming back into corporate. And, and if you're in a cube village, everybody can hear everything you're even thinking, much less talking about on your phone. So having a text go out and, somebody's going to respond to that. Yeah.
Discreet, quiet. Yeah.
Yeah. Nobody needs to hear it. They don't want to hear all of the stuff out there. But it's a lot of fun getting them into the technology stage, but being able to do some things that's specific to each individual, like I said earlier, changing their screens to where the flow is different to how they flow. Because if you think about, people don't always process things the same way. The roads are different to how they get there in their mind.
Big time.
And, if you can kind of steer them to how they need to, but let them take their own path to get there, then you're going to get their buy-in. If I got to switch up to where, you see this before that, and then, my other person wants that before this, I'm all about it. I'm all about making whatever flows for them, because in the end, it makes them happier. And that's all it is.
For sure. I think you've hit so many really great talking points here. I think where I'd love to just make a comment is one of the things that you said was, technology is not going to replace jobs. It's so true. What it will replace is some of the activities.
Mm-hmm.
At the beginning of this conversation, we both reminisced about how terrible it was to file away 200 signature cue cards.
Right.
Big credenza that I got to tell you, any professional librarian taking a look at the alphabetization of those cue cards would have absolutely rolled over and thrown up on themselves, because shocker, that credenza was not the greatest alphabetized piece, and nobody was going to take a stab at fixing that whole pile.
No.
And so, yeah, technology came around, and look, prior to my time at Eltropy and others, I was with an organization that sold electronic signature. And talk about a full circle, experience from
Yes.
talking to financial institutions saying, you don't need that little card anymore. There is more than just the autograph, because the autograph, at least my first signature card I was at the age of 5. Good luck trying to match that signature card to what it looks like today. And so technology can be adopted where the activities themselves change. And that's what everybody fears, right? I knew my ABCs. And so what happens if we get rid of that technology? I don't get to put in that card. But to your point, the reason why you love your team taking a lap, go for a walk, finish your thing, and then take a breath to stay creative. One could be, I need to add milk to my shopping cart list, which helps alleviate some of the stress at home. But 2, also giving them the creativity to say, I have too many screens, I need to remove one, and this is going to make my flow better, right? The idea is that now they're starting to think on how to make their lives work more smooth because they have more time.
Yes.
And so now they can come up with a really creative idea on how to solve an issue, or how to create a new communication workflow, which makes work that much better, which is only because of technology that came in to remove the activity that was sucking up those hours, putting a cue card in a credenza.
Right. I'm trying to think, it was probably 20 or 25 years ago that they told us that automated underwriting was going to take away all the interviewers. There was never going to be another interviewer. And I was like, There is no way. And still to this day, trust me, the automated engines come a long way, but still to this day, there are still people that need to be there to look at decisions. And, there's still people that underwrite loans manually, but you're not going to ever really fully get rid of everything. It's just trying to make your job a little more enjoyable, a lot easier, and you're not working as hard. I mean, some days I leave out of here, and I know my staff does too. They leave out of here and they're like, don't even ask me my name because I couldn't even tell you, and that shouldn't be that way. We shouldn't leave out of here stressed out or wrung out that we are like, oh gosh, do I have to go home and cook dinner, or I got to take the kids somewhere, or anything like that. I try to make sure that those are not the way that my staff leaves here, that they go home and they're able to function just like they would if they just got out of bed on a Saturday morning, and that's, if I go home wrung out, that's fine. I took that on myself, but I don't want my people that way. I want them to live life, enjoy life, have fun, and be the master of their own destiny. Not ABNB or any other company I work for be the master of their destiny. They need to be able to say, I either really like what I do or I really hate it. And if they hate it, okay, let's talk about why. Is there something we can fix? If not, then let me figure out how to get you in a role that you would enjoy. And I've had that conversation with people over the years. And, I had a young lady that she was a loan officer and she just couldn't get it. And I was like, okay, we know that you're not a good loan officer and that you're not thriving in this environment. What kind of environment would you like to try? Right. And she said, I would love to go back to the branches and do what I did in the branches. And I said, okay. I went to the head of the branches and I said, hey, I have this employee. She's just not a good loan officer. She's a great employee and she did well in the branches. Would you take her back? And they said yes. And they took her back and, we recast her. And that's what you're supposed to be there for. You're supposed to be there to say, okay, this isn't working out. Let's figure out a way to make you a viable employee. Not always is it to try to get rid of somebody or to get them out the door. It's all about trying to find that balance, not only work-life balance, but your balance in your work life and trying to do the things that, and technology sometimes it can hinder they're being able, like if there's not enough technology, like right now, I think I could use more connectors and I'm working on getting them the connectors because I feel like it hinders them. And, put texting in place and all this other stuff in place is going to help them. And I can feel that I'm hindering them. And it's like, okay, if we did this, if we did that, how would that help you? How would that, and they're like, and I had to get them to understand when we were talking about, we just went live with chat over in our lending and in our contact center. We switched chat vendors and we went with, Eltropy on that. But, I was like, okay, what if we put it in collections? And I'm trying to sell this, I'm like all of my high, happy face. And they're like, mm-mm. And I said, okay, hold on. I said, we don't have the staff and we're not trained for it. And I said, what do you think in the future? And they're like, and they're like, okay, here's our demands. And they gave me their list and they were like everything that I'd already thought about, but it was good to hear them think the same thing I did. And they're like, hey, yeah, we would do that, but we want these things. And I said, okay, let's do these things. And I said, and we'll build to it because right now we're a little short staffed. So we just hired a bunch of people. So when we're putting them in place, I said, okay, now I'm going to get them in place and I'm going to get them trained and I'm doing training differently this time. And they're like, wow. And I said, okay, what do you think about this? And they're like, I like this idea. So if you give them, the technology and you put it out there in front of them with the caveat of, okay, tell me your demands along with this is what it can do, I think that they go for it. And they're excited about that now in the next phase. They're real excited about, the texting and everything like that. So I think if you give them what they need and stop hindering their abilities and give them the creativity and the freedom, they'll be amazing.
Yep.
Well, they've also had a hand to play in the evaluation of what is important and what is not. And, like, here's the demands of, like, if we were to do this, we also need these three things to make life go easier. It's same thing as we have too many screens. If you remove one or two, it makes, the work environment a lot easier. And so this is such an important piece because, Michelle, you've been a very, big adopter of utilizing technology in various areas to make the process more simplistic overall, right?
Yes,
Less errors, more simplistic, lower cost of loan servicing overall, but it feeds
true.
into the team. But you've done a brilliant job of uniting your team or kind of corralling the team to have their opinions and to voice them. And so what is the fear? What is the advantage that we see that's coming up? What do we think are some of the pitfalls? Like, what are the early changes that we can make that can use this? And then when you roll out your technology, it isn't a surprise. Everybody already knows what's coming up. And I think that's
Right.
where you get the best adoption. I think you do this brilliantly overall, just in the conversations that we've had together that I know that you've had, even with your team, as certain things are getting rolled out. I think that is a concerted effort that needs to be voiced because I think you do it very well.
Yeah, and you really just you need to listen to your team and you need to hear them. And it was funny because one of the things here, one of my first challenges was trying to get them. They had where we did a lot of indirect lending, and while we were doing a lot of indirect lending, they were manually putting the title stuff into the software. And I said, wait a minute, why are you manually taking every, indirect loan and putting the vehicle information into the software? There's an upload for that. And they were like, oh, it broke and we just never fixed it. And I was like, you'd rather do this? So I fixed that for them and they're like, we thought that we wouldn't have enough work to do. And I said, no, now you've got more time to do this
Other
part of your
stuff.
job. And, they're like, so getting them to, starting slow and then little things and then hooking off little things and checking off little things. And now they're like, okay, what's the next thing she's coming up with? And like I said, I don't want them to work harder. I want them to work smarter. And what they do some days is the definition of insanity to me. And I'd just rather bang my head against a wall than watch them do things 120 times the same way. So we're going to get it fixed. It's, but then again, when I get it fixed, there's going to be new technology that's going to fix it even more. So it makes it fun. I mean, you continue to learn on a daily basis.
Supposed to.
Yes.
Yeah, 100%. I think, you use the quote of the definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result, right? And I think
Right.
what is it, Leonardo da Vinci
Yeah.
up with that? I think he also has, a quote that, a life lived in the pursuit of service of others is a world worth living or something like that.
Yes.
Right? I'm
Yeah. Something like
paraphrasing.
that.
Is
Yeah.
that something like that? It ultimately goes down the road of servant leadership, which I think, you above, many others, Michelle, I think, are exemplary when it comes to that. And one, by design. Two, I think it's just your human nature to do that, to shield from the chaos, but to allow this, an environment for creativity. And so
Mhm.
that is where I think, the golden nugget that I'm going to put out to anybody listening to this is go find the cue card that needs to be filed. What is the cue card that needs to be filed? Now go fix that workflow so that you can free up that individual from putting away a cue card, which is just a transaction. It's just an activity. It
It
doesn't
is.
require much. And you leverage your people for the superpowers that they bring. It's their experience. It's, sometimes their age. I bet you anything, your 20s are going to suggest something that is brilliant, as will your 73-year-old who will suggest something that is brilliant. And so
Definitely.
the cue card, get rid of the cue card to be filed, replace it with technology. Let's get rid of some of those things and then leverage the team for their creative gifts, their camaraderie, sometimes the naughtiness with the pranks in order to create an environment that is a healthy one and a safe one and a fun one so that we can come up with, different kind of rules of the game that make it more enjoyable for others as time goes on. I think that's the piece that I'm getting out of this, Michelle, that is so wildly oozing from your pores that this is the goal that you have with your team. And I hope I did get this correctly.
Yes, you did. You just have to connect. It's all about a relationship. It boils down to just building and learning and live it, learn it, love it. You have to live their life to be able to understand how to help their life. And then you have to love what you do and love your team. And I do. I love all of them and just think they're great.
100%. Well, Michelle, what a beautiful way to pivot and to leave it there. Any last comment, anything that ABNB is doing? I know we got to see each other at the Temenos event. Are you going to any other conferences for the rest of the year, or maybe just a shout out to the credit union itself? Tell me.
I hope to go to another one, but we'll see how that works. Still up in the air, but I have a lot of irons in the fire as far as trying to get more technology and get different things up and get things working better. So I've got a busy rest of the year, and I'm excited about it. So I think that, it'll be fun, and it just keep growing, just keep moving on.
I love it. A big thank you to ABNB. A big thank you to you, Michelle, for spending some time with us today. Just a shout out to your entire team. They work hard, they play hard, and they are well represented by a wonderful leader who loves to do everything for them. But Michelle, I can't thank you enough, and I do hope we get to see each other at least one more time before the end of this year. But when in doubt, I think we will be coordinating some face-to-faces as you're launching some of that technology. I plan to be part of some of those quarterly business reviews, and I honestly can't wait. I can't wait to see the before and the after, and I hope we do you right, and I know that we're going to work hard to do that.
Yeah, will. I know that. It's already made a difference, just the things that we've launched. So I know that it'll continue to grow and to prosper, and it's going to be a fun year. It's going to be a fun year.
I can't wait to see it. All right. Well, for everybody joining us, join us next time on the Eltropy Exchange podcast. My name again is Michael Pupil, and catch us next time. Stay connected, stay empowered, and we will see you again at the next podcast. Thank you, everyone. Thank you again, Michelle.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Eltropy Exchange podcast. For more insights and resources, visit us at eltropy.com. We'll see you next time.